Please welcome the CEO of the United States Geospatial-Intelligence Foundation, Mr. Keith Masbeck.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. This is absolutely fantastic. When we were approached by the American Geographical Society with this idea, this seed of what we might be able to do, it's very, very gratifying to see how you've turned out and the work that AGS has done. We were very, very pleased to be given the opportunity to help support them in bringing this to fruition today. And I was particularly excited to have John Konarski whisper in my ear about his plans for expanding this next year. So it's kind of exciting. So we're already working on it. I was a little concerned. I arrived shortly before what I thought was going to be lunch, and I picked the wrong morning to skip breakfast. It was a little painful, but the content was worth it. It's truly a pleasure to be able to introduce the keynote speaker who is going to come up here momentarily. Robert Cardillo is the 6th director of the National GeoSpatial-Intelligence Agency. He's been there all of 6 weeks, so as he will tell you, without question, he's an expert on everything that's going on there, far and wide through the breadth and depth of the organization. So I hope you've got very, very challenging questions for him. Robert is a longtime intelligence professional, starting off in this business in 1983 out of Cornell University as an imagery analyst in one of the precursor organizations to what we now know as NGA. Has had a series of phenomenal leadership positions, including being responsible for analysis at 2 separate intelligence agencies, both the Defense Intelligence Agency and the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency, and a number of other things. The last 4 years, Robert has done what he likes to refer to as turn in the community's homework. It's been Robert's responsibility over the last 4 years to sit and brief the President and provide intelligence support directly to the President's staff on a daily basis. And so I think it absolutely gives him a unique perspective on what the person is sometimes referred to as customer number 1 is expecting out of the U.S. intelligence system, but moreover being involved in those discussions, those policy level discussions, being on the hook to inform them, to have answers, to turn in the community's homework, a very broad perspective on the full range of concerns in the nation. And now, as the director of the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency, very, very specifically responsible for one leg of the IC. So, Robert, welcome.
Thanks, Keith. It is indeed, it's my privilege to be here with you. As a matter of fact, I was able to spend about the last hour and a half with you, saw a panel and a half, and was absolutely convinced after a few minutes that there's going to be a test here today, and I began to take more and more notes given the slides. By the way, this is my only slide, so we're going to draw down the maps per minute quotient here in a second. But seriously, this room is a gift to me and to my agency. The expertise that you represent individually, the organizations that you come from, the history, the contributions that you all make, quite frankly, is something that we thrive on at my agency and within the U.S. government. So if I get across nothing else in the next few minutes, please accept my deepest appreciation for what you've done, for what you're doing, and then hopefully, somewhat as a result of some of my remarks, we can take our partnership to new levels going forward. Lots of friends in the audience, lots of people that I've not yet met, but again, thank you to you all. Thank you to you all. As Keith said, I'm pushing 7 weeks in the job. I've met many of the men and women dedicated to our common cause, which is navigating our nation to safety through the myriad geospatial challenges we face. We all come from many different backgrounds and perspectives, and I saw 4 or 5 here today, all of value, all come together to create a common appreciation, a deep respect for the great value that geography provides our society in a role that's too often underappreciated. Every modern, local, regional, global challenge, every one, climate change, as you've discussed here, future energy landscape, as you've discussed here, has geography at its heart. The rapidly spreading geography of the internet, as more people carry handheld devices, every person a sensor, the emerging Internet of Things, as I learned this morning from a few of the startups in this town, but what you have long known, everything, everyone has a place. So the dependence on all of those things, on their georeference, makes what we do, spatio-temporal analysis, taking the work that you do, putting it into a context that can be conveyed to a very busy customer, is both a science, as you've seen much this morning, but also an art. I happen to come from the art side of that equation, so any real technical questions will be deferred to my experts in the back. So eat your lunch and get ready to answer those tough questions. But why is it that we see that spatio-temporal analysis as a bridge to the future of commerce, cooperation, and security? Because to me, geographers are natural integrators. Keith was kind enough not to read the title of my last job, because it takes too long, but in the heart of the title was intelligence integration, which was Director Clapper's mantra, his singular focus for the intelligence community. And within that, I found no one and no entity and no group better prepared to be that integrative capability than geographers. We use geospatial data to analyze questions with the geospatial scientific methods that give unique perspectives, all grounded in reality. All of that makes you increasingly valuable in a future in which everything and everyone is interconnected. So I'm going to take a few moments to discuss with you several key points. I'm going to talk a little bit about NGA, what our purpose is, where we're going. I'm going to talk to you about the impact of this growing volume of data, the velocity of change, and the explosive commercial market, again, some of which I was able to meet this morning. And then talk about what I think is a positive role that NGA can play as a transparent intelligence agency. Those words don't often get strung together, as a transparent intelligence agency. And lastly, I'd like to talk finally about the partnership that we have today and how we can grow that into the next generation with you and with your organizations. So earlier this month, we celebrated the 25th anniversary of the dismantling of the Berlin Wall. 2 years after that, the Soviet Union dissolved and the Cold War ended. There was a time during the Cold War, I worked it, I was an analyst working the Soviet Union, as all of my colleagues did, in which the US government, predominantly, had a virtual monopoly on the business. We controlled the sensors, we had the technology, we were able to compartmentalize and put behind doors with ciphers much of the technology that's in your iPhone today. But we were able to do that, we were allowed to do that, really because of the adversary at the time. And if you think back to the 80s and you think of the bipolar world, we were working against and trying to seek to understand a very big, very dangerous, but very slow adversary. And thankfully then we could take our time with our monopoly. And we could stay within the decision cycle of our customers, whether they're number one or the uniform or a suit, in such a world. And so it was easy to track disposition of forces because they were relatively static. Strategic warning was measured in days and if not weeks. And we largely, the intelligence community, limited ourselves to a global understanding at kind of this nation-state level. Of course, those days are gone, and since the events of 9/11, there's been a quantum leap in interdependency and complexity. We all agree that the world of 2050, that's kind of the center point for the conference here, will be remarkably different than the world of today. Just to give one benchmark, the first tweet was sent on the 21st of March, 2006, 8 years ago. And 5 years later, I was involved in the preparations, the decision, the ultimate employment of U.S. force in Pakistan with the raid in Abbottabad against UBL, Osama bin Laden. One of our jobs was to assess ahead of time the Pakistani ability to detect the raid beforehand, threat mitigation, understanding the battle space. Some of you may know, but some of you may not, that the very first Pakistani sensor to detect that raid that night in May of 2011 was a Twitter account of a graduate student who had moved to Abbottabad to get away from the noise of Islamabad and was complaining about the rotor blades of some helicopter from some Pakistani operation. Of course, he didn't know. But I say all that to say, our mindset about what's a sensor, what's a threat, what's an opportunity has changed completely. So today, history is made in messages of 140 characters, almost 500 million times a day. That was demonstrated again in Cairo in 2013, where Twitter again played another indications, warning, and opportunity role for all of us. Now, no one clearly accurately predicted the impact of the instant global obsession with social media. Tweets and images turn local riots into national revolutions and global movements. The global social fabric is changing in ways we do not yet understand. For us to mount the successful expedition to the future that this symposium hopes to propel will require far different ways of thinking than we have followed in the past. We are challenged to stretch our global understanding from nation-state strategies to lone wolf tactics, from static analysis to dynamic anticipation, from periodic observation to persistent understanding. NGA, the organization I'm now privileged to lead, is taking a leading role in how the national security community views this changing world. And let me speak briefly about that role. NGA has both a combat support agency responsibility. So when forces deploy, and I'll talk about that in a minute, we're responsible for preparing for them for that successful deployment. We're also an intelligence community member, so we're contributing to the broader knowledge base to understand both warning and opportunity for our most senior customers. Our customers range from the president for strategic warning to the military for operations to first responders, whether they're in Japan as a result of the tsunami, in the Philippines because of the typhoon, or in the US when we have a federal lead agency to sponsor our engagement. Now, traditionally, especially in my day as an analyst, we were a provider of product, fixed, stapled, shelved product. We still make products. I can't tell you we don't. We're moving, albeit a bit slowly, with government procedure and bureaucracy, into a dynamic, persistent, proactive intelligence service that guides customers to success. We're attempting to put online for our customers at all classification levels, and I'll talk more about that in a minute, a world-class spatial and temporal context. We analyze multiple types of geospatial content, integrate it with other intelligence sources, that's our integrative role again, to develop insights and understanding for our customers. Sometimes those insights are warning, sometimes they're opportunities, oftentimes it's just confidence in what's happening around them. We convey that content and that context in easy to understand ways so our customers achieve consequence that they seek. That is, they reach the goals of their objectives, of their mission space. So as I've told my workforce, if they are successful, we succeed. If they fail, we fail. And then there's no in-between for me and for our workforce. And so in such a world, as I've described, in which everything and everyone is a sensor, we're making strides to achieve objectives, advanced objectives, for example, to leverage emerging trends in high performance in cloud computing. NGA has been the first in the IC to share our content on both cloud environments, set under the DNI's Intelligence Integration Initiative called ISIL. We've created new collaborative tradecraft to do anticipatory analysis across multiple disciplines. We are changing the way people think, work, and communicate to produce new knowledge when they are faced with complex situations and wicked problems. We've set this high bar to become the leader to deliver customer consequence because of the next key challenge I want to address with you. Since the end of the Cold War, there's been that quantum leap in speed of change. The volume of data is now measured in terabytes. The impact of global communication and increasing difficulty to predict change with any accuracy. All of these uncertainties led our National Intelligence Council to deliberately follow an alternative worlds approach in their Global Trends 2030, which came out 2 years ago. Our guest from Shell this morning talked about the alternative scenarios. That was the same approach that we took at the DNI a couple years ago. And as we learn from the insights of hundreds of strategists around the world, and I mean around the world, from Russia, from China, from academia, from Africa, from Asia, one fact struck me more than other. The document was an extraordinary exercise in applying our global understanding of geography to make educated forecasts about the future. And to make these forecasts, we had to apply our deepest understanding of spatial temporal reasoning as the heart of the national strategic decision framework. It's critical to understand the complex interdependencies that create the challenges we face during the coming decades. So rather than making definitive predictions, what Global Trends 2030 embraced was a view that we could best provide a framework to think about the future. We wanted to stimulate strategic thinking by distinguishing megatrends, many of which that you've spoken about this morning: food, water, energy, and game changers or critical variables like wide regional instability. We recognize that the world is changing faster than ever. The threats are morphing rapidly, so that many of the unknowns exist at any time. So we offered 4 what we called potential worlds, not to predict the future, but to provoke decision makers and strategic thinkers into thinking about how to achieve positive outcomes. We believe the future will be the consequence of the interaction among the megatrends, the game changers, and most important, human activities. For example, the situation in Syria and Iraq with the Islamic State of Syria and the Levant, ISIL, shows a megatrend, resources, and a game changer, regional instability, how that can create havoc when a determined human organization intervenes. It can also show where geography may not determine a conflict, it can dominate it. As you well know, ISIL is threatening to permanently destabilize the state structure that was established by the 1916 Sykes-Picot Agreement, dividing the Levant into French and British spheres of influence after the fall of the Ottoman Empire. One of ISIL's primary goals is to establish a Sunni caliphate that redresses these boundaries. A critical strategy in ISIL's drive is to establish the caliphate is to control major water and energy resources in northern Syria and northern Iraq, in what they see as the heartland of their Islamic State. These resources are the headwaters, major dams on both the Tigris and the Euphrates. If ISIL controls these resources and the oil fields in the areas, it'll have a stranglehold on all that cascades down from there. ISIL's drive to control these resources, especially the water, is a geographically based strategy that has been pursued for at least 4,000 years by everyone from the Hittites to the Persians to the British and the French. But ISIL's strategy to reestablish a 7th century caliphate relies on a shrewd exploitation of 21st century technology. It's especially adept at exploiting the explosion in social media to establish its legitimacy, create fear in its enemies, attract more fighters, carry its message across the globe, and spread its network. Peter Kasich was beheaded in a place called Dabiq, Syria. Dabiq was referenced by Muhammad as the location for an end-of-time battle with the Crusaders on their way to what he called Constantinople, what we know as Istanbul today. It was for a particular reason that they did that act in that place. It was of geographic and religious and historic importance to them, and thus part of their message. Of equal concern to the stability in the Middle East, thanks to the Syrian civil war and the rapid rise of ISIL, are millions of refugees who have now fled Syria and Iraq into Jordan, Lebanon, Turkey, and the Kurdish areas of Iraq. These obviously are putting enormous strains, fiscal, social, resource pressure, to key allies, Jordan and Turkey, not to mention Lebanon and Iraq itself. But as dangerous as the regional stability for ISIS, the situation does exemplify how we can apply geospatial technologies to imagery and geospatial data with advanced tools to provide our customers with a better view, a better understanding. So let me briefly tell you a story about what NGA recently did in that environment. Several months ago, Tens of thousands of Yazidis and Christians in northern Iraq were fleeing ISIL attacks and atrocities. They were trapped in a place called Sinjar Mountain. At the time, our planners and our partners were unsure about how best to deliver the humanitarian aid and help the Yazidis and Christians escape. So NGA Foundation data helped the customers understand this complex and severe terrain. We analyzed airdrop locations, evacuation corridors. We layered multiple types of data: roads, elevation, populated areas, weather conditions, the ISIL threat, and the like. We added multi-source reporting on top of that. All of that came together to give leaders and military commanders the context they needed to make the decisions about what might happen when combat operations, in this case relief operations, and humanitarian activity interacted. Day in and day out throughout the crisis, our analysis made our key customer aware of the status of refugees, airdrops, in near real time. Spatio-temporal analysis was critical to understanding the complex situation. We learned this lesson actually in the 90s and before then as well, when Yugoslavia disintegrated into ethnic conflicts among Serbs, Croats, Bosniaks, Kosovars. Today, we need to extend those lessons back from Yugoslavia through the lesson that we see today in Iraq and Syria, into Sudan, into Libya, in Mali, Nigeria, Afghanistan, and more. However, thanks to the internet and social media, we suddenly have access to vast troves of geospatial information to help us better understand these complexities. Thus, we at NGA are rapidly developing tools and methodologies called activity-based intelligence that allows us to manage this volume, to leverage this flow of data that we've never had before, this big data, so we can see the trends within the big data, and we can find the networks and the patterns of activity and better understand these difficult situations. But the analytic tools and technologies we and you are developing, the automated algorithms on sensors that are searching for patterns, mean little if analysts do not know how to evaluate all that data, make the data useful, vice overwhelming. The analyst must understand and practice deep spatio-temporal thinking, how to identify the factors that influence the fewer trends. So what do I mean about spatio-temporal thinking? Let me use an analogy. Spatial thinking is the ability to put together myriad pieces of a puzzle together, a static puzzle in 2 dimensions. The puzzle may be a religious or ethnic group in Syria and Iraq, their locations, their relationships. But everything in human activity is always changing through time and place. So the human jigsaw puzzle is constantly changing. Pieces are moving in and out, conditions are changing, shapes are changing, the timelines around these shapes are changing, and the puzzle is spinning and adding new dimensions. We are challenged, our analysts are challenged with dealing with such a complex scenario and providing, again, context confidence for our customers to make their decisions. In short, in a world where everything and everyone is a geospatial sensor, geospatial methods will lead the way to understanding the world by revealing the uncertainties, enigmas of rapidly changing complex systems. So let me tell you another story about where NGA right now today is playing a vital behind-the-scenes role in the Ebola crisis in West Africa, and how we're enabling customer consequence by marshaling traditional and advanced geospatial methods. How this crisis has unfolded shows how a seemingly local but terrible problem can quickly become a global crisis and demand a global response. The President called the Ebola crisis a national security issue because it affects international trade, air travel, international politics, economies and stabilities of developing countries, and potentially the American people. The crisis also has brought about unexpected yet gratifying examples of partnership and collaboration. NGA analysts have taken our commanding knowledge of the Earth and its features in Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone. We have analyzed complex variables such as access to government services, healthcare, food and water supplies, and transportation infrastructure. At the White House's request, we're working with John Holdren, mentioned earlier today, and Megan Smith to provide a geospatial foundation for our medical deployers. Other 2 words that I didn't often string together in my job, but we're now supporting medical deployers. So we've produced easy-to-understand, unclassified graphics that have guided decisions by the national security community, the UN World Health Organization, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, USAID, many non-governmental organizations such as Doctors Without Borders. Our work has helped them to better understand the human geography, the social-cultural issues affecting the spread of Ebola throughout the region. And when the President directed that the 101st Airborne Division deploy to build hospitals in Liberia, NGA analysts immediately stepped up to analyze the terrain, infrastructure, identify the best and safest locations for the hospitals, while keeping U.S. service members out of harm's way. I've been most impressed by a simple story about the impact one person can make in such a situation. An NGA analyst who's embedded with the 101st Airborne Division is working now on the ground in Liberia, in Monrovia, with the Joint Forces Command for Operation United Assistance. And he's helping to upgrade the country's essential but out-of-date maps. Maybe something like a one-man Bowdoin expedition. He's using current unclassified commercial imagery. He's sitting directly with the Liberian analysts who work for the Liberian Institute of Statistics and Geoinformation Services. And you can imagine how important it is for the Liberian government to have understanding, knowledge of this growing plague across their country. They now have accurate maps of the areas that have been hardest hit by the Ebola epidemic. They also have expertise to do their own work when we remove the 101st and our expertise. The NGA analyst has downloaded more than 1 terabyte of up-to-date commercial imagery. The Liberians have added their local knowledge. Our analysts and the Joint Force colleagues have trained Liberians in new techniques, saving hours and days of effort. Right now, they are identifying safe helicopter landing zones for supply drops, supporting the U.S. military in locating hospital sites, and creating more accurate maps. Now, this is just the beginning of the consequences of these small acts. In the future, the Liberians will be able to use their new content and techniques well beyond the current crisis to build a modern geospatial database about their country for a future census and future elections. We've also posted our context on the World Wide Web, a new venture for us. We've got much to learn in how to do this, but this will be more and more common and more necessary. So to give you one idea, we've made available on that, at that level, 29 different maps, 157 data layers, and 67 databases. As far as traffic, there have been more than 400,000 views on our publicly accessible worldwide website since it launched on October 23rd. To give you some reference for that 400,000 number, when we measure our website on our controlled access levels of internet connectivity, over the same time period, we had 900 visits. So you can imagine where this is having its most effect. Now, it's a frank reminder that I and we at NGA must do all we can to provide our data, knowledge, and services at the lowest classification level possible in order to provide context for our customers. So let me tell you how we're doing. So think of our total content of Liberian information in context. 3% of that I've got to set aside because we acquired it with systems that are too sensitive for us to ever get down to the level. But that leaves me with 97% of the data, which I think is pretty good. So if you go to the World Wide website, you'll see, thank you very much. You're the geographer and the water giver. This is lovely. Did we already discuss the coolest title in the room? Yeah, that's the Lee Schwartz, coolest title in the room, the geographer for the United States. Capital T, capital G. So 3%, right, can't use. 30%, though, is out on the World Wide Web, which I got to tell you, before I asked the question, I didn't think it was going to be that high. I thought we were going to be underplaying that. I've got 7% on what we call a NIPRNet site. Just think of it as a site where you need to give me your username and password. I need to check you out and whatnot. It's still unclassified, but really hard to get to, okay? So that leaves 60%. Well, that's in my lawyer's office right now, okay, because it's being reviewed. And I don't mean that doesn't need to be reviewed because it depends how I acquired that data. It depends who I got it from. I might have gotten it from a foreign partner. I might have gotten it from a company in this room, okay? When I acquired that data, okay, it came with a contract that said this is how you can use it. So again, I'm not saying it shouldn't be in the lawyer's office, it should be. But I want to get it out there soon, okay, because we need to get that 60% or as much as we can out and down to the World Wide Web access. And I knew going into this that we wouldn't be tremendously fast at this. I know we would hit bumps in the road. I know we would find out, new lessons about what we could and couldn't do with the data. But we have to start to figure out how to do this, and we have to do it better and better. Now, one of the main contributions we got from the outside world, even before we put up that public-facing website, was due to a terrific response from a data cell to the Worldwide Human Geography Data Working Group. So again, that's the other thing too, is sometimes NGA is not as good as we should be when we're pushing our data out. We're also not as good as we should be when we're welcoming data in. And so we seek to reduce barriers on both of those accounts. So both the ISIL crisis and the Ebola epidemic are just two of dozens of international crises to which NGA analysts must apply our geospatial techniques and our spatio-temporal reasoning every day. Our analysts are deeply involved in every crisis you hear and many you don't. Ukraine, Russia, Iranian nuke, North Korean proliferation and provocation, South China Sea, and of course, given that we still have thousands of troops in harm's way in Afghanistan and Iraq, all of that adds to the load. So a word about transparency before I close. Our disaster relief efforts, like those in the Ebola crisis, allow us to be transparent in ways that our sister agencies cannot. These efforts allow NGA to play a vital role to build the public's confidence in the intelligence community. The Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, has said that geospatial intelligence has a great advantage in our current environment because it's the most transparent of our collection disciplines. The world of geospatial intelligence is becoming increasingly transparent because of the huge number and diversity of commercial and open sources of information. And NGA is uniquely positioned to lead the IC, the intelligence community, to demonstrate the value of this to the American people. Our successful open disaster response partnerships with FEMA, state and local first responders have been a groundbreaking initiative in transparency and open sourcing. We encourage collaboration and integration among first responders by being transparent with our data and applications. We work closely with first responders to provide pre- and post-disaster data so they can quickly understand the damage to their critical energy infrastructure. I just returned from a trip to Huntsville, Alabama, where we're involved in a partnership with that city in its Geo Huntsville project to prepare for the next disaster should it occur. We create online event pages on the World Wide Web that are open to all first responders. They can upload their data to the mobile devices and share that data with everyone who needs access to it. We provide thorough analysis of the impact of the disaster on roads, bridges, etc. And with all that up-to-date data, FEMA managers and local responders can make better use of their finite resources. So lastly, let me discuss our common bonds here, our partnership. Our interest in facing the challenges of using spatio-temporal reasoning and geographic science to build a safe and secure future. Given these bonds, we, this society, and NGA, have an enormous opportunity, and I would offer a solemn responsibility, to grow and sustain the new generation of geographers and geospatial scientists that we need now more than ever. NGA has many roles and venues for collaboration as the geographer for the Defense Department and the Intel community's functional manager for geospatial intelligence. We openly share common interests across a wide range of public interests which can partner with the society. In fact, in a fine example of our partnerships, I'm pleased to announce that last week, NGA and the U.S. Geological Survey established the Centers of Academic Excellence in Geospatial Sciences programs. Together, we're going to encourage 2- and 4-year institutions, including research universities, to participate in the program. In the programs, NGA, USGS will work with the institutions to design curricula and develop capabilities to improve their education and training for a geospatial workforce. This program is just one way to build and strengthen and cultivate the current and future geospatial sciences workforce that the U.S. government so desperately needs. It's one way for NGA to act to close the huge geographic education gap that concerns you as much as it concerns us. We already support elementary, high school, college programs. We recruit actively at historically black colleges, and we support science, technology, engineering, math programs across the board. We're concerned about the decline in geographic education in schools and the abysmal geographic knowledge of the workforce when we all have a growing demand for geospatial information analysts and when we're creating new careers related to geography and science. I urge you, this society, to work with and to join with NGA to explore advanced joint efforts to address this growing need. I look forward to trying to host an AGA session at our headquarters in Washington, which I know would be great for our workforce and I think beneficial to you. I also urge NGA and this society to consider other areas where our interests and challenges overlap, especially emerging challenges. The risks and opportunities of climate change, as we saw so much this morning, particularly in the Arctic with its issues of resource management, sovereignty issues, energy and mineral exploration and the like. Humanitarian assistance, disaster relief. The Ebola crisis is only one example of our global efforts. We have combated natural and man-made disasters resulting from climate change around the globe, from Fukushima to the Caribbean. Climate change not only influence the scope and scale of natural disasters, it can also affect resource competition for water, energy, and as the Ebola crisis shows, pandemics. Lastly, we can work together to promote what right now looks like a very bright energy future for the United States, albeit with trends that can go one of 2 or 3 or 4 ways. So in Global Trends 2030, the document I mentioned earlier, we looked at one of the megatrends being this U.S. rising independence on the energy front. Much of that increase in production will take place in the U.S., dramatic growth in the production of shale oil and natural gas. For us, though, as national security analysts, this has a huge impact around the world, and not just economically. There are secondary and tertiary effects of this revolution. Both our adversaries and our allies will make new assumptions about our commitments and our arrangements. And that's happening as we speak. And so this economic, political, and stability all come together. In these areas, from climate change to the next generation of geospatial scientists, NGA wants to partner with you. In remote sensing industries, we continue to partner with commercial imagery, foreign partners, to identify and use best technologies. We've got a long history of support for commercial imagery and agreements with other commercial data sources, meaning that we can participate in legal and policy discussions about that need for transparency. We especially need to work with you to understand the implications of the Internet of Things and the impact of every person in being a sensor. So in closing, I think the future of our national security demands and depends upon our ability to maneuver wisely through this complex, interdependent, contrasting, and fast-evolving circumstance. No one can predict the realities of the megatrends and game changers that will come. Yet together, NGA and partners like you, the forward-looking geographers that are here and that you represent, to shape trends that will shape our future. The science fiction writer, Frederick Pohl, once said, "You can't really predict the future. All you can do is invent it." So let us venture boldly forward on this expedition to the future, not to predict, but to prepare the best future we can for our future generations. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you. Chris, you don't get the first question. Oh, maybe you do.
I have no question. I just have the microphone.
Okay.
So if anyone has a question, I can. There we go. Mr. Matt.
Robert, I hope Congress is paying attention to how much China is spending on mapping. Vanessa Lawrence is a friend of a lot of ours. She was shocked to see them build a $1 billion campus in about 3 years.
Yep.
When we announced the sale of GeoEye, the Chinese approached me and said, "Would you sell our imagery? We're going to go from being an importer to an exporter in 4 years." They've already built several satellites. So I hope Congress is watching.
I agree. Thank you, Matt.
Any other questions from the audience? You don't get this opportunity very often. Over there.
Thank you, sir, for your service. You hinted a little bit at the beginning of your talk about how much of things have changed since you were an imagery analyst in '83. You talked a lot about sharing data. Can you talk a little bit about sharing software analytic tools?
Sure.
Especially in a world where a lot more is going on out west without necessarily the government need in mind.
Well, thanks for the question. Well, we're actually, I mean, we can do much better than we are doing today, but we're proud of our presence on, for example, sites like GitHub. So NGA's got a homepage on GitHub. We've got 15 software packages up there now that are freely downloadable. The Huntsville example I gave, they're using a piece of software called GeoQ, which is helping their mayor and their first responders do asset allocation across various stages of a disaster response. Now, we're doing it because it's in the public interest. We're also doing it because you can get something back from GitHub. People who download your software could add value to it or find bugs or mistakes or better ways of doing business. We're early in that experience, but I think the 15 that you would find today will just grow to more and more. The other thing, and I want to say I learned a lot from the session that Keith Masbeck held with these startups. I guess I came to that meeting with this general impression, and I left it with a very specific takeaway. I don't want to compete with these people, okay? Good gracious, they're innovative, they're excited, they're passionate, and don't get me wrong, I've got innovative, excited, passionate people at NGA, but they work in the US federal government, okay? So it's a bit of an oppressive environment. So, while we will do the best we can to take such applications and make the best use of them, I don't think we're gonna, beat Silicon Valley or Brooklyn or wherever all these companies were from this morning. And so what I want to do is I want to just make sure my door is open or my checkbook's open or probably both so that I can take full advantage of all of that innovation, put my analysts on top of it, okay? And so that we can focus on that exquisite non-commercial piece, which is very important to customers like the president, but not reinvent, much less duplicate, much less spend money on efforts that, as I said, would unnecessarily compete with those. So we're looking for other ways to be more open to those sorts of outside, innovation and technology. Karen, you might get the last question.
Robert, so maybe you could tell us a little bit about your view from a mission perspective, because you're such an ops guy, and how are you going to bring that into NGA versus the systems views we've had in the past?
Well, that's one heck of a last question, so you will get to your next speaker. Well, my general takeaway, again, as Keith said, I was born in this place, I was raised in this place, I spent a lot of time with people in this room in this place. My impression after 6.5, 7 weeks is that it's still a great place. It has been. It's on the right general path. It tends to be, I think, too internally focused. What I mean by that is that we get caught up, and this really doesn't have anything to do with bureaucracy and US government rules and whatnot. It's mindset to me. And so my drive from October 3rd through today has been to flip the lens. Yes, we must have world-class internal processes, and yes, we must have great connectivity between all the different pieces of NGA. But if you can't bring all those pieces together in such a way that it's meaningful to the customer at their point of decision, then it's not that meaningful, guys, girls. And to me, it's a rather simple flip, but profound. And so go back to my comment about defining our success only by the customer success. That rubs some of my colleagues the wrong way. Good gracious, they could make a bad decision. I go, I know that. They could create a policy that's misguided. I get that too, all right? But look, just if you come to your desk or your workstation or your handheld, if we can get there, with the constant driver being what will that person on the other side of that monitor or that smartphone do with it, I think, one, it will create more energy in your own individual work. Two, I think it will create interaction, okay, and this is to the good, integration, more unity of effort across not just NGA business lines, but NGA in commercial, NGA in academia. It'll unify us in a purpose that we didn't always have. So my constant refrain these days tends to be, that is wonderful work. You have just wowed me with your expertise. And what are they going to do with it? Now, don't get me wrong, my analysts have answers to those questions, but it takes 2 or 3 to get there. And I'd rather them start with that answer in mind. And it's just my belief that that will help, drive more efficiency, effectivity, and really more unity of effort, and then ultimately more effect on the other side. So that's the whole long speech about consequence. Look, thank you for your time. I know you guys have a lot more to do today. I've very much enjoyed being with you. I'm so glad I'm departing before the test is administered. Chris is probably going to give more colored cards with more homework assignments. Yes, he says he is. But I'm very appreciative, not just of this time, but of what I said at the outset, of what you all have done, are doing, and will do. And please know that NGA's door is open. Well, it's cracked.
It's actually locked inside a vault.
You may have to knock twice. I apologize. The buzzer doesn't always work, all those kinds of things. But please, please try again if we've frustrated you before. We do want to open that crack wider and invite you all in. Or you can invite us out. How about that? Thank you very much. Thank you.